The sun was barely cresting the Sierra Nevada when Emma Carter pulled her ranger truck into the lot near Yosemite Valley's visitor center. Her breath fogged in the crisp February air as she stepped out, her boots crunching on the frost-kissed gravel. Above her, El Capitan loomed, its granite face a monolith against the pale sky. But today something marred its majesty. A large U.S. flag, hung upside down halfway up the cliff, fluttered in the wind. Emma knew the symbolism, distress as outlined in the U.S. flag code. She'd heard about the protest too. Climbers, furious over the National Park Service's latest round of job cuts, had scaled the rock to make their point. Thousands of positions axed, search and rescue teams gutted, trails left to crumble. Emma felt the sting personally. Her own job teetered on the edge, yet as she stared at the inverted stars and stripes, a deeper unease coiled in her gut. It wasn't just the politics, it was John. 3 weeks ago, her friend and fellow ranger had vanished near Bridal Veil Fall. And no trace, no pack, no footprints, nothing. The search had been called off after days of fruitless effort, hampered by slashed budgets and dwindling manpower. Emma still woke to nightmares of his laughter, silenced by the roar of the falls. Now the flag waved like a taunt, a signal that something in Yosemite was terribly wrong. She adjusted her cap and headed toward the base of El Capitan, where a small knot of protesters lingered. Most were bundled in jackets, holding signs, "Save our parks" and "No more cuts." But one figure stood apart, his gaze fixed on the flag. Sam Grayson, a retired guide with decades in the park, looked weathered as the cliffs themselves, his gray beard catching the morning light. A bold move, Emma said, nodding upward. Sam didn't turn. It's more than bold. Sam didn't turn. It's more than bold. It's a cry for help. And not just about jobs. Her brow furrowed. Oh, what's that supposed to mean? He met her eyes, his stare piercing. You know the old stories, Emma. Po-ho, no. The name sent a shiver down her spine. So, she'd heard it whispered around campfires, an evil spirit, a wind that haunted Yosemite's waterfalls, calling people to their doom. A Miwok legend, nothing more. But with John gone, the word carried a weight she couldn't dismiss. That's folklore, Sam. Is it? Was it? Is it? He fished a folded map from his coat and pressed it into her hands. Take a look. Red dots, every spot someone's disappeared in the last year. All near waterfalls. Emma unfolded it, her pulse quickening. A dozen crimson marks stared back at her, one unmistakably at Bridal Veil Fall. Fall? You're saying there's a pattern? I'm saying the park's awake, Sam murmured. And that flag? It's stirring something up. She wanted to argue, to cling to reason, but the map felt like a confession, and John's absence gnawed at her resolve. I'll look into it, she said finally, tucking the map into her pocket. Sam nodded, but his eyes held a warning. Be careful what you go looking for. Sleep eluded Emma that night. The map lay open on her cabin table, its red dots glowing in the lamplight like bloodstains, and the lamplight like bloodstains. Yosemite had its share of mysteries. Over 30 missing persons cases in her decade here, some never solved. Hikers who vanished mid-step, their trails ending in silence. The reports blamed falls, bears, or disorientation, but the rangers knew better. The park whispered secrets in its winds, its shadows. By dawn, she'd made up her mind. If the service wouldn't dig deeper, she would, for John, for the others, for her own sanity. She packed her gear and set out for Bridal Veil Fall. The trail was a familiar ribbon of dirt and stone, winding through pines that stood sentinel over the valley. Today, though, the forest felt too still, the birdsong muted. The roar of the falls grew as she approached, mist rising like a shroud. She stopped at the viewpoint, scanning the spot where John had last stood. Nothing. Just water crashing into the pool below, endless and indifferent. Then a breeze swept through, sharp and cold. With it came a sound, faint, like voices murmuring just beyond reach. Emma froze, ears straining. The wind stilled, and the whispers vanished. She shook her head. Water over rocks, she thought. That's all. But as she turned, a glint in the underbrush caught her eye. She knelt, brushing aside ferns, and her breath hitched. John's camera, dented, its lens cracked, lay half buried in the mud. Back at her cabin, Emma's hands shook as she slid the camera's memory card into her laptop. The screen flickered to life with images, the falls framed by pines, El Capitan under a golden sky. Then the last photo. It was blurry, snapped at a tilt as if John had stumbled. Through the mist near the waterfall, a shadow loomed, tall, vaguely human, but wrong somehow, its edges too fluid, too dark, her throat tightened. A trick of light, a smudge? She wanted to believe it, but the chill in her bones said otherwise. She grabbed Sam's map and traced a line to Vernal Fall, where a hiker had disappeared 2 months back. If there was a pattern, she'd find it. The trek to Vernal Fall was steeper, the air thick with spray from the Merced River. Emma climbed the mist trail, her boots slipping on wet granite. At some buff. The forest pressed close branches clawing at her sleeves. At the top, she paused, catching her breath as she gazed at the water plunging into the abyss. Emma! The voice was clear, sharp, cutting through the fall's roar. She spun, heart hammering. The trail stretched empty behind her. Who's there? Mumaskikatiki. She called, her voice swallowed by the wind. Silence. Then a flicker movement in the trees. A shadow darted, gone before she could focus. Fear prickled her skin, but she held her ground. She was a ranger. Damn it. She didn't run. Still, the descent felt like a retreat, the weight of unseen eyes pressing on her back. At the visitor center, Emma pored over the map, marking her encounters. Bridal Veil Fall, whispers, the camera. Vernal Fall, the voice, the shadow. Oh, she remembered Yosemite Falls too, a search last year where she'd felt a chill she couldn't explain. Each site tied to a red dot, each near water. She needed context. The center's library was small, but it held a shelf of local history. She pulled a dusty book on Miwok legends and flipped to a passage. Poho no, the spirit of the falls, lures the unwary with whispers, pulling them into the mist where they vanish forever. Emma shut the book, her pulse loud in her ears. Coincidence, she told herself. Oh, but the evidence was piling up. Too much to ignore. That evening, she found Sam by the protest campfire, his face etched with exhaustion. Sam, she said, sitting across from him. I'm starting to think you're right. He nodded, poking the flames. A Poho knows restless. Knows restless. The cuts, the flag. It's a spark on dry tinder. Did it take John? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. Maybe. His eyes grew distant. I've seen things, Emma. Shadows that don't belong. Voices when I'm alone. Voices when I'm alone? Once near Nevada Fall, I saw something. Standing there, watching. Her stomach twisted. Why keep it quiet? He gave a bitter laugh. Who'd believe an old man's ghost stories? She leaned forward. What do we do? I don't know, he admitted. But that flag's a beacon. It's calling something out. Emma dreamed of John that night. Emma dreamed of John that night. He stood at Bridal Veil Fall, his ranger jacket soaked, his face blurred. It's coming, he whispered, and the wind tore him away. She jolted awake, sweat-soaked, as the cabin windows rattled with gusts that sounded too much like voices. She couldn't wait any longer. At first light, she geared up for Nevada Fall, the latest disappearance site. The trail was a punishing climb, her legs burning as she ascended. At the overlook, she stood alone, the waterfall's thunder vibrating in her chest. I'm here, she shouted into the wind. Oh, what do you want? The air grew heavy, the whispers rising. Soft, then insistent, a chorus of lost voices. Her skin crawled. Show yourself? A shadow flickered at the cliff's edge, then vanished. She turned, searching, when John's voice rang out, Ema, Emma. There, a figure in the mist, tall and gaunt, its eyes glinting like whetstone. Not John, not human. Fear seized her, but she stepped forward defiant. The figure reached out, and an icy force yanked her toward the drop. And no, she fought, boots skidding on slick rock, but the pull was relentless. Her vision blurred, the edge rushing closer. A sudden gust slammed into her, hurling her sideways. She hit the ground, gasping, pain blooming in her ribs. When she looked up, the figure was gone. She ran, not stopping until the trailhead, her mind reeling. It was real. Poho no was real. The real. Back in her cabin, Emma sat trembling. She'd nearly died, felt the spirit's grip. But why her? Why now? A knock startled her. Ranger Mike, her supervisor, stepped in, his face grim. Sam's dead. Her blood ran cold. How? I found him at Yosemite Falls. Fell from the top. Oh, was pushed, she murmured. Mike frowned. Samin, what's that mean? She spilled it all, the map, the whispers, the figure. But his expression hardened. Emma, you're grieving. John's loss messed us all up. But this is a story, not a suspect. It's not just a story, she snapped. I saw it. He sighed. Take some time off. That's an order. Alone again, Emma paced. Mike didn't believe her, but she knew the truth, and she couldn't let it win. The next day, she found a ritual in an old library book, offerings to appease Pohono, a gesture of respect. Desperate, she gathered wildflowers and drove to Bridal Veil Fall. Kneeling by the water, she set the blooms on a stone. I'm sorry, she said, voice trembling. For the cuts, for everything. Please let them go. The wind swirled, gentler now, free of whispers. For a moment, she felt lighter, as if the park exhaled. But as she stood, a figure flickered in the mist, distant, silent, watching. Not John, not Sam. Something ancient, unyielding. Emma's hope faltered. It wasn't enough.